G'day everybody, I'm Scott Poynton and welcome to another podcast. And today I have the great pleasure of welcoming Chris Langwallner. And Chris is an Austrian and he is sitting in Singapore and we're talking on Zoom. And he is the founder and CEO of WhatIF Foods. WhatIF Foods. So Chris, welcome to our podcast. How are you, mate?
Thank you very much for having me. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. I'm doing absolutely great. I was looking forward to this for a long time. Super excited to get going and share a little bit what we do, what we are, where we're coming from, and the sort of impact that we want to make. So absolutely fantastic to be on your podcast. Thank you.
Yeah, no, great to have you, mate. And you're here because I think you're very inspiring, and I think what you're trying to do is really inspiring. We'll come to that in a minute. But just tell me a bit about Chris Langwallner. Tell me the Chris Langwallner story. How old are you, mate?
Turned 48.
Turned
not
48.
A long time ago. 48.
Right. So what's the story to those 48 years? Give us the summary version of young Chris Langwallner and how you grew up.
I grew up on what I call a perfect supply chain. So I grew up on the countryside outside of Salzburg, about 17, 18 kilometers north, in a tiny small village. And way back then, my family was really having a good time on a farm. We had our own cattle, we had our own cows producing milk, a butchery, we had pigs, we had all sorts of livestock, and of course the grassland that you need to get going with regards to that. Then we produced actually our own producers, a little bit of butter, but mainly, making sausages and cuts for our restaurant, which was a classic setup in that part of Austria. You have the church in the middle of a village, and next door is a big restaurant, and that was my family, and this is where I grew up. Perfect supply chain, because literally you know the animal that is on your plate on that Sunday roast, and that deeply connected me in the early days in my childhood to agriculture, to animals, to farming, to people, to communities in a village. I'd always fun watching people go to church first and then have a good time over a beer and things like that. So that's how I grew up in Salzburg.
Yeah,
it was just a fantastic time.
Sounds like
very good memories.
Yeah, pretty rich community upbringing, mate. And where did you go from there? How did you come to be in Singapore? What's the path you've taken, Chris?
Oh God, there are a couple of stopovers, so you have to bear with me to take you through that.
That's all right.
As a young boy, I think in my primary school at some stage, people told me that I'm dyslexic, so I was not really fond of going to school. I've enjoyed helping my dad on the farm and what have you. But I'm very grateful to my mom because she convinced me actually that after secondary school I should go for a sort of a college education. I don't really know how to call it really in English, but essentially it's a diploma course in agriculture focusing on dairy farming. And that's what I did for 3 years. It was a life-changing experience for me because for the first time I started to fall in love with learning. And from there I then started to say, hey, if I have agriculture, why don't I go for food science and technology, which was a new sort of discipline that just opened up way back then. And off I went. I convinced my mom to keep on supporting me. And so I did. I then studied food science and technology. This is where I also fell in love with my today's wife and mother of our 2 children, who has ever since then been on the journey with me, and probably even kicked off by her, to be honest, because she at one stage in our life said, I don't want to stay here all of the time. Let's go out and explore a little bit. I didn't think like that. It was her for the first stepping stone going abroad. Yeah, as it were, I then did my national service and joined the industry thereafter. I worked for a seasoning company in Austria for a few years, for 5 years. I got my basics going, but opted then to basically consider to say, okay, if I want to grow in my career, I need to learn English properly. I need to go and experience what the world holds out there, and decided to go abroad. Had an opportunity to join a multinational company in the UK. Had a fantastic time. Was an absolute amazing learning experience. Thereafter, I've helped an Austrian entrepreneur to turn a business around in Russia, which was a completely different experience, yet very, very energetic in a way. It was very pulsing, because at that point in time, Russia was just like changing itself, and it was very, very interesting to be there. In 2005, I had a hard conversation with my wife, because I wasn't home much. So my wife gave me the yellow card, and she said, the next one is red and you're out. So let's better make sure that you understand what I'm talking about. And because what I did is, while I was working abroad, I was also doing an MBA, just to holistically build my background. And she said, you hardly know your son, so we need to change. We need to change our the way we are living as a family. And we decided to then start a company in India. I mean, the journey to that decision is a complex one. It's not a one-dimensional one. There are many, many considerations that came in. But a long story short, we decided to actually start a company in India. We relocated in 2005, 2006. And we built a company literally from scratch. And today it is probably India's largest seasoning company, employing many, many people, impacting probably thousands in the supply chain, and doing good stuff. However, what got me going is that the business per se leveraged on creating flavors and excitements, sensory excitements that basically brought children into eating potato crisps, namkeens as they call it in India, and noodles and all of that. And I saw my children growing up, and watching them growing up and battling with keeping their weight under control, munching on all of this, what I today call junk food, made me really consider very, very hard whether or not this is some sort of the path I want to be on for the rest of my life. And I came to the conclusion there must be a better way of doing things. And I opted to exit from that business. I had a short stint thereafter in a multinational company, but actually the multinational company got me to Singapore. But I went back to my entrepreneurial roots and founded a company that today is the host of WhatIF Foods. And it's all about making enjoyable foods and convenient foods, not only much more nutritious, but also much more impactful for a better world out there. And what I refer to is really touching degraded arable land and farming communities while we're producing a healthier food for healthier people and consumers out there. And maybe a little bit later on, we have a little bit more time to go into those sort of details. But in short, not really short, but in essence, in a nutshell, this is my journey. So it took me all the way from Austria via a couple of locations in Europe to Asia. And that journey has been rich with many, many different viewpoints, turning points, milestones, experiences. And I'm a happy guy. I am enjoying what we're doing, and has been a fantastic life so far. So,
well, I'm glad to hear that, mate, because I do know, and this is the reason why I'm so keen to talk to you, that there's a really deep philosophy underpinning your work. And you talked about what your experience of your company in India and watching kids struggling with their weight as they were eating junk food. And there you were a part of that. And so I know you're a person who reflects very deeply on things, and this is where you've come to WhatIF Foods, but there's a path, there's a step in between there, and that's the philosophy that underpins your work. And you've got a name for that. You call it Nutritional Paradox, the Nutritional Paradox. And that's how we first met. A friend of mine sent me the Nutritional Paradox video, which I found to be a very, very powerful. I think it was only about 5 minutes or so, but it was, having watched it, I was like, holy smokes, that's true, and we need to do something about that. So tell us about the Nutritional Paradox, Chris.
Yeah, the Nutritional Paradox has been an initiative really founded from a space where I was just really, really frustrated with many conversations that I had within the industry and, of course, outside the industry, the frustration came from a point that, unfortunately, in today's day and age, we are educating people to become specialists. Of course, they have tremendous knowledge in their specialization, but it comes at a very large cost, I think. And that is that they keep on learning more and more about less and less until they know everything about nothing. And what that really means is that they are filtering out the larger system around their issues. And I found that really, really frustrating because starting, the company that hosts WhatIF Foods today, I needed to explain every now and then, I needed to explain as to why we do stuff the way we do it and what is it that motivates us to do it in a certain way. And therefore, I then sat down on an afternoon, on a weekend, and I started to scribble down what I know about agriculture, food, and nutrition. And many months and a huge team effort later, it became a white paper that essentially describes the status quo of our industry, of the agro-food industry, from a point of view that brings agriculture, food, and nutrition together and not analyzes them into separate silos that are hardly talking to each other. So it describes, for example, the paradoxical situation that we are today living in a world where 2.3 billion people are overweight and obese. Before COVID-19, about 840 million people are on starvation. They are just hungry. COVID-19 has escalated that largely. We were on a downward trajectory, but this is now the trend has reversed because of COVID-19. So there's this paradoxical situation where we have almost 3 times as many people on this planet. They are suffering from overconsumption. To that effect that every minute 6 people die because of eating too much food. And then we have people that are going hungry to bed every night. There's another dimension to it, which is much more difficult to see, which is what we call being nutritionally challenged. And there are a couple of aspects to this. Number one, hidden hunger is a well-described disease, however, very, very difficult to diagnose. Hidden hunger is a situation where people have a perfectly well body mass index, so they are not overweight and not underweight, but they are suffering from a lack of micronutrients. And because of that, it's very, very difficult to diagnose. But there are many out there who are suffering from that. But the nutritional challenged category in the nutritional paradox also includes those people who basically can't afford healthy dieting, healthy eating. Because we are living today in a situation where junk food is cheaper than your 5 portions of fruit and vegetables that you should eat on a day-to-day basis. You go to the quick service restaurant around the corner, and for a few euros, a few dollars, you can fill up your tank with 2,000 calories. But you do it with fruits and vegetables, it is very, very expensive. In the other parts of the world, beer is cheaper than water. That is not right. And therefore, even if you have the knowledge acquired that you are unhealthy feeding yourself, there are communities today on this planet that struggle to do so because they just don't have the financial means to get to the proper nutrition that they need. So another very paradoxical situation, and that is not only in developing countries. This is very much all over the developed world as well. So this forms the kind of situation with regards to these people that are really, really challenged. So all in all, we have a situation where 7 consumers out of 10 suffer from what we eat and what we produce. So there is a huge sort of supply towards the healthcare industry, because cardiovascular disease on the rise, obesity is on the rise, when it comes by diabetes, bowel cancer, colon cancer, strokes, and heart attacks are just results from essentially wrong eating. And we are responsible for that. So that is one aspect of the nutrition paradox. But paradoxically, while we actually manufacture all of this food that feeds this 7.7 billion people on the planet today, frankly, we are screwing the planet royally. We have a huge amount of deforestation going on. We are emitting carbon, greenhouse gases. We are the second or the third largest emitter of greenhouse gases. We have 70% of all freshwater reserves being withdrawn from our industry. 77% of arable land is used to actually make animal feed. That goes then into producing 17% of calories that we consume. And on top of all, there are just 2 handfuls or a dozen of crops and a handful of livestock that actually make 75% of all food that we consume. With it comes a devastating outcome, and that is the loss of agrobiodiversity. Farmers today do not have markets anymore to produce alternative crops, to sell it into profitable markets for them to actually diversify their income stream, so they become very vulnerable to adverse effects. And with it go soils, because if we can't have crop rotations, if we can't have a multiple crop on soil, we one-sidedly take the resources away from it and we leave it behind. So today we are in a situation where 2.6 billion people are directly connected to farming and agriculture. 74% of them are the poorest of the poor. And on top of that, 52% of their assets. Now consider you're a smallholder farmer, you have a couple of acres, and you see half of your assets essentially going to waste because these assets don't produce crops anymore. So the degradation of land is a huge issue that actually unroots farming communities and sets them in motion. And that is happening in a speed never recorded in history before, 35 times faster than ever recorded before. So we are living today in a situation whereby we are deforesting about 30 soccer fields worth of primary forests every minute to keep on feeding this old system, while we are losing 23 soccer fields worth of arable land. If we want to see a healthy and nutritional well-being in 2050 and feed 10 billion people with respect, not only with calories, but also the nutrients that they need, if we want to do that, then we have to change. And we have to change swiftly. We cannot wait. And that is essentially the core foundation, the pillar is the pillar of what actually makes us exist, gives us the energy every day to do what we do, and is the foundation for WhatIF Foods to do things differently. That's the philosophy that actually connects everything together.
It's pretty powerful, mate. And you know, someone who's travelled around the world in a lot of these countries, you know, what you say resonates with me completely, because I've seen the deforestation, I've seen the degraded arable land, and it's just a linear. It's not a circular economy in any way, shape, or form. It's just a linear process of taking good, productive land and converting it into wasteland in many ways. And then we've got to keep that cycle going. So we've got to pump in some more good land at the other end. And a lot of people are enriching themselves in that process. As you've said, not the farmers, but chemical companies, agribusiness companies, food companies. And you know, you mentioned this. You've mentioned very much to me this bizarre statistic that 70% of all of the food, 60% of all of the food we eat comes from just 3 crops. Just 3 crops: wheat, corn, and rice. And there's a few more. Obviously, it takes it up to about 10 different crops. That gets us up over 70% of our food. So all of this incredible diversity that's out there that could actually help keep the land in a better condition through cycling crops and things like this. It just doesn't happen. We degrade the land, we pump in the chemicals to keep the nutrients into it, but the soil itself no longer has any intrinsic nutrients in it. It's just the nutrients we put in from a bag, which comes from the fossil fuel industry. We just keep going down the drain. So, you know, when I first heard about the Nutritional Paradox, a mate of mine who works with you, sent me that video. I just found it and read the white paper, found it very compelling. So we will share that with people when we share the podcast. But for people who don't get access to that, just tell us your website, mate. It's where we could find the video and the. Well, we'll put it on the text at the bottom of the podcast. But I just want to come back to, so WhatIF Foods. Tell me, look, there's a pretty powerful underlying philosophy there that gets you all out of bed every day. So what if what? Why the name WhatIF? I mean, I sort of get it. I know it from the Nutritional Paradox, but just make it really clear for folk. What if what?
What if is, oh my God, when we started to conceptualize and think through as to what a name could be for our consumer goods, for our consumer-facing products, we had a short list of 80 names that potentially could be the name for the brand. But I would say in a quiet moment with a dear friend of mine, he basically looked at me and he said, in today's day and age, people want to see authenticity in a company, in a brand. People want to see honesty. They want to see transparency. And the way I've met you was through a what-if question. Because when we got started, we always asked ourselves, what if we do this? What can happen thereafter? The question always got us to visualizing a new universe that we potentially can make beyond just technology for the sake of technology, beyond just inventing things for the sake of science, but to really think things through to say, so if we, for example, take the deep fryer out of manufacturing instant noodles on large scale, what could be possible? What if we take this equipment out, commercially viable? What would be a potential universe that we can create? And that was very, very deep in the DNA way back then when this friend of mine counseled me. And I turned around and I said, so let's bloody hell call this brand WhatIF, because this is what we stand for. And that's as authentic and real as it can become. And that got us essentially going to say, so if we call the brand WhatIF, aren't we inviting a consumer to have a conversation with us? And honestly, I said, I would love to have that conversation. Because today you can have conversations. Yes, you have the old guys out there on social media who are basically negative about anything and everything. But there are too many people out there as well who actually mean it in a positive spirit and want to have a conversation and engage with you and actually uplift your message and multiply it. And I think that is what we wanted to really achieve, is that conversation with people rather than old-style marketing that talks at people. And what always comes to my mind is my grandfather. My grandfather, 7 children, he kept on forgetting their birthdays, but he knew major events within the village. Why? Because he needed to make sure he produces enough product for these events, be it a wedding, be it an anniversary, be it even a funeral. And he knew all of these data points, yet he forgot about the birthdays of the children. And I think he left that to mom rather than him caring about it. But why I'm bringing this up is because he had deep, deep conversations with his mates, with his customers. And from there he learned and became better every day. And in today's day and age, we can use the power of social media to actually engage in that conversation as well, rather than just letting us be drawn into our respective bubbles and see only, a very blinkered domain of what's out there. So WhatIF Foods is here to basically spark a conversation with consumers and hopefully also makes people think about their choices. Because the way I'm experiencing the world right now, even in the pandemic, COVID-19, polarized world, left and right, up and down, how I experience that is that there is a rivalry out there between people who try to articulate newfound value systems. I call it the humanity's newfound values. They're not really articulated yet. There is huge opposition. There is this rivalry of ideas, but I think we get there. People like Greta Thunberg has helped us to have conversations that we probably would not have had without her. So there are progressive people out there who want to basically do good to this planet, want to do good to essentially generations that come after us. Yet, the purchasing behavior of these consumers, the very same guys who are actually out there, fighting for these new value systems I'm talking about, these very same people struggle to actually match their newfound values with their actions behind the purchases they make. So every now and then they still give in, and naturally everybody does, we are just humans. But there is also an underlying issue. That is that there are not many choices out there who actually then match up a product to this newfound value system at an affordable price. And therefore, that is also something that WhatIF wants to take on. This big gap between the action consumers make on a day-to-day basis versus the value system they would like to see come through in order to see a much better world out there. And I think that's a huge challenge, I think, but WhatIF Foods wants to be part of that journey, wants to actually be such a bridge that brings these two together and wants to be an offering to those people who deeply care about it and want to make one step towards a more progressive future. And that is the foundation of WhatIF Foods as a brand. And then we use our science and technology, having fun with it and be playful and create all of these colorful experiences, make sure that we have a lot of different flavors and different occasions and so on and so forth, which is basically the playful side of this quirky looking WhatIF brand, is the playful aspect of food. Because one thing is for sure, if we sit down on a dinner table, we don't want to talk about the serious issues that we just right now in front of us have on the table. We just want to enjoy food. We want to have a good time with our mates, with our families, with our children. We want to make sure we're enjoying ourselves. So there's a playful aspect to WhatIF Foods, which is therefore that, if people have time, go and see us on the internet and see the logo, which is essentially a question mark that is quirky, and you can actually interpret like a steaming kettle in it, or a brain, or all sorts of things. We've done it on purpose because we wanted to have the playful side while we experience. And then essentially people who buy it and understand the philosophy, understand what we do, give them a peace of mind to say, hey, don't worry about it. Now you're enjoying something. You're now enjoying our noodles, for example. And they have done good. They've uplifted communities. They have actually been part of restoring degraded arable land. And you're eating something that is not unhealthy. You're eating plant-based products that are essentially good for you. So don't worry, we give you peace of mind as well. So that is the two aspects of the brand. The philosophy is what I've just explained, having these conversations and so on and so forth. So it's a fascinating journey. We are learning every day, which is great as well.
It's fantastic, Chris. I love it. And look, you've mentioned there the noodles, and you've also mentioned this regenerative agriculture. Okay, so the normal person going into a shop when they buy a food product, they don't normally hear about many stories about agriculture at all, usually because probably the stories aren't so great. If they're lucky, they might get a bio certificate on it. But you really are linked into this whole concept of regenerative agriculture. And so the WhatIF noodles, let's talk about the noodles for a start. There's other products too. But the noodles are really fascinating because you mentioned a little bit earlier about, what if we don't deep fry the noodles, for example, in palm oil, which has its own footprint, ecological footprint. What if we don't do that? And what happens to the nutrients in the food? But let's go back to Ghana and the Bambara groundnut, because this is again another pillar to your philosophy of the three crops that make up the 60%. Part of your philosophy is to take that 3 and make it into 300, right? So just tell us about that and the Bambara groundnut and what you've done in the food tech side, your science and your research, to bring these WhatIF noodles to market that are nutritious, that are plant-based, and that also are linked to this regenerative agricultural concept with small communities growing Bambara groundnut. Who ever heard of Bambara groundnut in West Africa? So share us that, mate. It's a lovely, I love it. The whole thing ties together, and that's why I think what you're doing is really important.
So essentially, we have asked ourselves the question, what if we take the deep fryer commercially viable out of making a product that's today instant noodles? For people who don't know the size of the industry, let me put that in context. There are about 105 billion portions of instant noodles consumed every year. It's a gigantic industry. And because of the noodles are lightweight, there's quite a volume behind it. So the core reason of using deep frying as a processing step is to basically have a very fast dehydration process step within the production, because you want to have something that is ambient stable and can sit on the shelves for a long period of time. So deep frying an instant noodle portion takes about 3.5 minutes, say, in average. Whereas if you would try to achieve the very same thing, it takes you anything between 35 to probably even 70 minutes. That's what we have seen. Now, where is 3.5 minutes and where are 35 minutes in a product that is 105 billion portions? Just imagine the size of the factories that all of a sudden would come about if people will adopt to air drying. So we understood those sort of challenges, and we said, if we want to invent against this, we have to come up with a commercial viable solution for it. So that got us going to say, okay, within the food industry, we don't have anything sexy enough to help us overcome that challenge of fast dehydration. But then we were sitting literally over on tables, and we had things like tissue paper on the table, and I was always, because it's a better joke, I talk about toilet paper. We looked at toilet paper and we said, now hang on a second. Toilet paper is made from paper pulp. There is something in common between paper pulp and noodles. Both of them have water and both of them need to be dehydrated. Now, if deep frying would be the holy grail to dehydrating water, then toilet paper should be deep fried. I haven't seen that on the shelf. So how on earth are they doing it? What is the sort of approach they use in order to actually do it differently? And that got us thinking outside the box, adopting and exploring several different technologies. And today we are the inventors of a technology that basically replicates the deep fryer in terms of efficiency without deep frying, using technologies that we borrow from total different industries. With that comes the opportunity to then say, okay, if we don't deep fry anymore, we are not exposing the noodle cake to these high temperatures with all of this oil coming into the product, because during the production process, during deep frying, the noodle picks up to 20% of fat of the frying oil. So that is not included anymore in the noodle cake. So if we don't do that, what else can we do and what new universe can we open up? And we basically said, okay, there's an opportunity here. Yes, we still work with wheat flour, but we are not deep frying. Hence, we eliminate the need of palm oil there. So we reduce the demand side of it. But then we have about 20% or 15% of an opportunity in that noodle cake to actually make it nutrient dense. And that gets me then back to the story about the degraded arable land and what we call future fit crops. Future fit crops at WhatIF Foods are such crops that display a capacity to grow on very challenged soil, degraded soil, with ideally very, very little water, in a meaningful yield, so that farmers who opt to actually grow it have a reward for the labor of producing this. We connect and reach out to farming communities and actually incentivize them quite royally, actually, because we are talking to them directly, no middleman. And by doing so, they are compensated fairly. We get a material that is basically grown and has achieved the rejuvenation of soil that otherwise is unproductive and is left behind from the big crops and big agriculture. And we implement that and we put this into the dough of the instant noodle in order to bring nutrients into what is otherwise a calorie-dense product into the consumers. So we're thinking very much circular here. We are not thinking one-dimensional, one corridor. We are thinking really very circular and say 360 sustenance. That is essentially what we do. We are here to feed people and our consumers and our customers healthily. We give rejuvenation to the degraded arable land, and we help farming communities to have a meaningful income again. And that journey of identifying future fit crops got us to explore the Bambara groundnut, which is essentially a crop that we fell in love with, simply because it is very, very humble. It has not been touched by humans in the way that it is ultra bred and very finicky to farm. It is actually the opposite. About 2,500 different land races known. It originates in West Africa. It grows very well in the Sahel, so south of the Sahara, the Sahel region, where literally it grows on land where there's no competition anymore. And the Bambara groundnut has survived all these pressures from cash crops and commodity crops because the women actually planted as an insurance policy. In other words, if they run out of cash, if they run out of water and what have you, they can fall back on their storage of Bambara groundnut, make wonderful dishes, and have peace of mind that they have all the nutrition that they need for their kids. And that's how the Bambara groundnut has survived. Our initiative in Ghana, north of Tamale, is an initiative where we are basically saying we're not aiming to buy this insurance policy away from the community. Very much not so. We want to actually encourage them to produce more for us. We are anyway a small startup company. We don't need that much, but we want to encourage them to produce more. Don't sell us your security stock. Keep it, because you don't know what's around the corner. But produce more. And by reaching out there, it is just wonderful the way we experience these people. The villages we work with, the village head has an annual saving of $20. They are the poorest of the poor. They run 4 hours every day to get the water the family needs. And challenges like that are just daily problems for them. So the deeper philosophy behind those sort of work is that, of course, it is about making use of their land that is otherwise degraded, ensuring that these communities have a meaningful income and a meaningful livelihood, not only so that they can afford education of their children, because teachers are available, but the state doesn't have enough money to pay the salaries, but because of our purchase on a village level, they can actually pay the teachers and then therefore provide education. And all of that is just really, really powerful and uplifting for them. And more so, the moment we do that, we don't set them in motion as climate change refugees, because that's another reality out there. The OECD has told us a few years ago that if we don't tackle these sort of problems, bringing meaningful livelihoods back into these villages, then we are setting about 140 million people in motion as climate change refugees. And you sit in Switzerland, I sit in Singapore, and I don't have to tell you where people are trying to get to. I have a son who is right now servicing the Austrian army, securing the border, and he's been confronted with those sort of refugees. And it's a total different side of things that I'm experiencing for the first time through the eyes of my son, which is devastating. This is not a happy job to do. So it is, I would say it is our responsibility to think a little bit beyond just technology and science and venture capital and markets and all of that. We have to really think things through. Make sure we are approaching this holistically, and that is what we are trying to do. At least we have a good go about it. Let's see how far we can run with it.
Exactly, and we should mention the Bambara groundnut. It's a really fascinating crop because, and you mentioned this idea of future fit crops, because we are seeing in these regions, particularly the dry regions like the Sahel, where the rainfall is decreasing overall, and when it comes, it tends to come in more intense storms, so there's all sorts of problems with erosion that washes away the degraded land. Now, what's fascinating about the Bambara groundnut is a couple of things. One is it's a legume, so it actually brings nitrogen and good nutrients back into the soil when it grows, so that's terrific. So it is regenerative agriculture. But from a nutritional point of view, it's very nutrient dense, right? It's got a lot of protein in there, a lot of micronutrients. So when you pop this into your noodle mix, you're just supercharging the nutrient benefits. You're not filling people up with oil, deep fried oil, and you're giving them a good dash of protein, a great variety of micronutrients. It's a complete food, and you're getting great feedback, Chris. I believe obviously in Asia these noodles are prized. They're a comfort food, a convenience food, as you say. So you can't just turn up with some poor tasting, dodgy old noodle that has a nice story attached to it. It's actually got to taste good, and you're finding that you're getting this great feedback, right? And people are really going for it. WhatIF Foods has a bit of a bright future, it seems to me.
Oh, we certainly hope so, and we are learning every day from people who are so-called inventors or early adopters of something that is as new as we are. We are learning from them, we're listening to them, and it is a fantastic journey. The technology gives us a lot of flexibility. We're looking forward to do much more with more different colors and ingredients in our products. Because at the end of the day, over the last 150 years, the industry has adopted technologies, approaches that essentially rested on aroma molecules to make food taste nice. And we stripped out a huge variety of ingredients that we were used to. And therefore we have consolidated everything that we today call the nutritional paradox. And one work that we do, one aspect of what we do is to basically make use of these ingredients to deliver taste again. And real taste of products. Here in Singapore there is hardly a farm, let alone kids on farms and experiencing it. They're walking through supermarkets and look at a milk bottle with a happy cow face. I haven't seen a happy cow face in my life. Before a cow comes to milk, it's in pain, essentially. So there's this illusion that we have created about it. So, and we try to be as transparent as we can be with regards to all of this, and tell honestly what we do. We don't have nothing to hide. And if people say that it tastes great, come and buy more. If we say have an idea, throw it at us. We do a collaboration. We have done stuff with a stand-up comedian. We've done stuff with a master chef. We've done stuff with other influencers here in Singapore that basically came organically to us and said, hey, this is great what you guys are doing. And every time we do something, we are baking with our shakes and things like that. It's just really, really uplifting and powerful. It's just a lot of fun as well in the way doing it.
No, it's fantastic, Chris. Look, we could probably talk for the next 4 hours, and there's so much going on and there's so much you're trying to do, but this really is a personal journey for you. And I know that as part of that personal journey, notwithstanding you grew up on a dairy and cattle farm, you've actually moved to certainly a vegetarian life, and I know you're eating a lot of vegan food as well. And so you seem to be walking the talk, and I find that hugely inspiring. You're not just telling a good story and then going out and tucking into your processed food and all these climate, carbon-rich foods like large amounts of meat and things. So this is very inspiring for me, and you've got a philosophy that underpins everything you're doing, and I love it, and I think what you're doing is extraordinary, mate, and absolutely want to wish you the very best. Going to be watching WhatIF Foods, and I must say I was very grateful recently. I received a lovely parcel of a whole range of samples of what you're doing, and I'm going downstairs in a minute to have some Bambara groundnut noodles for lunch. And I find them to be absolutely delicious, and not only delicious, I absolutely have the joy of eating them because I know they're good for me, and I know they're not bad for me. They're not full of all sorts of trans fats and things like this. So, congratulations on the journey you've taken. It's extraordinary. You're only 48. My goodness, we've got many more years of excitement to come, and I look forward to working with you on. One of the things we've been talking about is how do we help spread the message of the nutritional paradox, because WhatIF Foods, I believe, is going to be a great success. But we need 200 companies doing the same thing. We need 2,000 companies doing the same thing, and spreading the word of the nutritional paradox to take that 3 crops that are producing 60% of our food up to 300 crops, Bambara, groundnut and other crops, is part of your own personal mission, and pretty inspiring to work with you, mate. And I want to thank you so much for joining us today and sharing us some of that. And ladies and gentlemen, if you want to do Google WhatIF Foods, and Chris and the team are starting to export their noodles and their shakes around the world. You don't have to just be in Singapore. They're just getting started on that journey, but go to the website and read the story. What is the website, Chris? We'll put it in the text, but what is it, mate?
It's whatifoods.com. Very easy. There's whatif-foods.com. You can find us.
whatif-food.com. So fantastic. Chris Langwallner, what a journey you've been on and what a journey you continue to travel. Thank you so much for sharing with us today.
Thank you very much for having me on your show. It has been a pleasure. I find it so easy to share things with you. You're such a powerful person. Keep on doing what you do and help us on the Nutritional Paradox. I think it deserves, as you say, many, many more WhatIF Foods out there to basically bring a much brighter future about. And I really look forward to that. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Chris. Cheers, mate.